welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, your boy on social media at MMALOTN, and the architect behind the MMA Fight Archive, ensuring you leave no stone unturned for these upcoming MMA events. With the addition of ONE FC just this past week, we are now at 20 different promotions that we cover on the service, spreading over 5,000 different profiles, fighter profiles for you to browse through to ensure you're getting as many direct links as possible for these fighters so you know exactly what to expect when they step foot in the cage on the weekends. So make sure you guys check it out. Find out why there's 110 subscribers on the service right now. You get a 7-day free trial to try it out for free. Link for that in the description below. Once again, that is the MMA Fight Archive. Make sure you check it out. All right, we are back with our second MMA Lawcast episode this week, and it is the first PFL card of the year, their world tournament, the premiere of their world tournament, as they have obviously changed the format of their show and their promotion overall. Before it used to be the regular season and then the playoffs, but now they're ditching all of it. They're going straight to a tournament style. Win and you move on. Win, you get to the finals and you win $500,000. Before it used to be $1 million. Now they drop it down to $500,000, and they've made it a lot easier to follow and ditch the whole point system. So I'm a fan of the whole tournament type of style and just win and move on kind of thing. Doesn't make it as difficult to follow. ACA, which is the premier Russian promotion, pretty much utilizes that format, not for their entire cards, but for the majority of their cards, they do tournament style, and that's what the PFL is looking to do this year. So very excited to see how this shakes out. I believe every card or the first 3 cards will have 8 bouts, first round bouts, followed by an alternate bout for each card as well for each weight class. So a ton to look forward to. For this week, they're going to be going over the 170-pound and 145-pound divisions. Tons of fun and interesting prospects, former champions that are going to be involved as well. So should be a good time, should be a fun experiment to see how this tournament format goes compared to the regular season that they used to do before. So again, their first event is this week. It actually goes down on a Thursday, and then I believe the next events that they'll be having are going to be going down on Friday. So the next one, PFL 2, will be Friday, April 11th, and PFL 3 will be Friday, April 18th. But we're breaking down PFL 1 for you guys here. So without further ado, let's get right into this. First fight up, Frederick Dupras coming in at -105, going up against Nathan Ghareeb, who comes in at -115. I believe this is the featherweight. Yeah, this is the featherweight alternate bout. Dupras comes from the Montreal fight scene where he's had the majority of his fights. He's the Samurai MMA champion over there, most recently defeating Canadian MMA legend Jesse Arnett, submitting him in the early goings of the second round. Now, this is a guy that has all of his wins coming by finish. 8 of them by finish, 7 of them in the first round, and 4 of them in less than a minute. The guy goes out there and just looks to take his opponent's heads off immediately, or as his way is to normally win fights, by submission. He looks for club and subs, or he just looks for ways to get his choke game going. He loves that front choke series, has a slick guillotine, has a fun Darce choke as well. Obviously, has that rear naked choke up his sleeve. Very fast, very athletic, has some stinging power. Nathan Ghareeb is a guy that I originally came across back in April of 2021 when he took on Cody Law for Bellator. Both the guys were 2-0 at the time, and obviously Law, a more highly touted prospect, was able to control that fight and win it. Ghareeb was actually had his LFA debut against Lorraine Douglas at the end of, I can't recall exactly when that was, but that was just 2 fights ago, if I'm not mistaken. And that was a fight where he nearly finished Douglas at the ending of the first round. Douglas was saved by the bell. Second round comes along and Douglas is able to get him out of there within the first minute. And Douglas would go on to win the LFA title. So not a bad loss on Ghareeb's record, considering what Douglas has gone on to do. Ghareeb is a guy that likes to utilize pressure, boxing combinations, and stay in his opponent's grill, not really giving them much space to throw. But he's not the most athletic, not the most fast, or speed is not his trait. technical skill wise, not the greatest either, but he is a scrapper. He likes to push the pace and stay in a spot where he can break his opponents down. But I'm going to have to lean with the Canadian here. Now, I'm not a big Canadian believer in the fact that like we don't usually have the greatest skilled fighters getting to these higher levels and having a lot of success. There is a new crop of talent obviously approaching that could change that narrative. But I feel this is a very winnable fight for Dupras, who I believe his athletic and speed and power advantage could allow him to land those big shots against Ghareeb and eventually set up a club and sub opportunity. At these near pick'em odds, I'm more than happy to side with the Canadian here, as I think he'll be more dangerous and I'll eventually lead to a finishing opportunity, which he gets within that first or round and a half mark. All right, next up, Joseph Luciano coming in at minus 230, going up against Ceric Shields, who comes in at plus 195. Now, this is the welterweight alternative bout. Now, Luciano made his PFL debut last time around, coming in on short notice against a very tough Stephen Hill. And it was a pretty competitive matchup. Both guys looking for takedowns and unsuccessful with it. Ultimately, Luciano was able to cinch up a dart or anaconda choke in the second round after a poor takedown attempt from his opponent led to that opportunity, and Luciano was able to take full advantage of it. He is more of a submission specialist than anything. 7 of his 10 wins coming by submission. He has all those Muay Thai tattoos on his back. He has some decent Muay Thai, but nothing that's going to cause a lot of trouble for a lot of opponents. It's usually his grappling that allows him to get his wins. He goes up against Ceric Shields, who is actually scheduled to compete on an LFA card 2 weeks from now, but getting this opportunity, he pulled out from that and accepted this PFL spot. And he's a fighter I've been hearing about for a couple fights now. Very strong grappler. He just earned his BJJ brown belt, if I'm not mistaken, back in December. Very strong, very physical fighter that looks to get his opponents in the clinch, drag them to the ground, hop on their back, and eventually look for submissions. The striking is where he's kind of fallen short in the past against guys like Thad Jean and Alfonso Leyva, even Josh Quinlan from back in his amateur days. But he's definitely improved his game a decent amount, but it's all about getting into the grappling, where he can often utilize his physicality to really wear opponents down. Now, in this matchup against Luciano, I'm surprised Luciano is such a big favorite here at minus 230. I think Shields can be very competitive. I think Shields is more physical. I think he's stronger, and I think he can get this into the grappling realm where Luciano will have some struggles and constantly being on the defensive there. Just as Jonathan McAuliffe was able to grind out Luciano, I think Shields can do the same thing. Again, Luciano will have a striking advantage, but I don't think it's to the point that's going to cause Shields a whole lot of problems. So I'm going to have to lean with Shields here, and especially to get that plus 195 number, I'm happy to take the plunge on the underdog here. All right, next up, first matchup in the featherweight tournament is going to be between Nathan Kelly coming in at plus 110, going up against Tai Kyun Kim, who comes in at minus 140. Now, Nathan Kelly had his 11-fight winning streak snapped last time around as he fell short against Ahmed Magomedov. Now, I know a lot of people were looking to get that plus money on Kelly, but unfortunately, they were forced to rip up their tickets as Magomedov was able to out-wrestle, out-grapple, and eventually submit Kelly in the second round of their fight. Kelly did have a glimpse of success where he had the back of Magomedov, but a good amount of discipline and patience allowed Magomedov to get out of that spot and eventually work to an opportunity to wear on Kelly and open up that submission opportunity. Now, Kelly is a solid grinding grappler that often wears his opponents down and finds finishing positions from that top position. But the guys that he's doing it against are not the highest levels of fighters, right? Dmitry Solimais and Vikas Singh Ruhil, those guys are not of the level of Magomedov. That was a steep step up in competition for Kelly. Now, in this matchup against Kim, it is another difference in terms of the guys that he's been facing in the past. Maybe not the level of Magomedov, but still much higher level than what Kelly has been facing in the past. Kelly's a guy I've been hearing about for a few years now, so it's finally good to be able to research him and see what he's all about. Very solid striking, usually fueled by his range and length, utilizing his jab and his cross down the pipe, utilizing good speed, good footwork, good range management, and his defensive grappling is pretty high level. The lone loss he has on his record is a Brave CF title split decision loss to former UFC fighter Roman Bogatov, and that was a fight that was very close the entire way, but I thought Bogatov just edged it out in that final round, which is the round that I really think that fight came down to. But when Kim was able to establish his range, he was able to box up Bogatov and bloody him up, just as he's done against numerous opponents in the past. He does a great job in terms of sticking and moving, and his takedown defense is improving, and I also think his ability to work off his back and staying as active as he is, especially with his newly acquired BJJ black belt in December, I think that's going to continue to give him confidence to throw up submissions off his back, create reversal opportunities, and eventually work to his feet where he can get back to his striking. In this matchup, I expect Kim to have that striking advantage, and I think it's big enough that it's going to really deter and frustrate Kelly, causing him to make a lot of mistakes in this fight. I don't doubt that Kelly will have a few successful moments with takedowns and a bit of control, but I don't think he has the level of control that we've seen from guys like Bogatov who have been able to keep Kim on his back. I think that we'll see Kim batter Kelly on the feet. He could possibly even find a late knockout here, but I think Kim will eventually win this matchup by decision, out damaging Kelly over the course of 15 minutes. Our next up, welterweights going at it here, as we have Yanis Bachar coming in at plus 160, going up against Masayuki Kikuiri, who comes in at minus 185. Now, Bachar was actually on the most recent season of The Ultimate Fighter, where he got knocked out in 20 seconds by finalist Robert Valentin. Now, that was a fight where Bachar really did not expect Valentin to come out so hot and heavy, and Bachar is normally the guy that gets his opponents out of there quickly. He had a 50-second knockout of O'Meal Brown, where Brown was actually a minus 300 favorite back in his Cage Warriors days, and that ultimately earned Bachar a spot on The Ultimate Fighter. He's a Greek fighter with a lot of kickboxing experience, has some solid striking, but he is a little bit sloppy in terms of his striking defense at times, and there were numerous times in his fight against Carlo Pedersoli that he was nearly out of there, but luckily he was able to grit it out in some of these tough spots and eventually find that third round finish. I don't think he's that good, and I think he's kind of benefited from some knockout spots that obviously earned him that opportunity on The Ultimate Fighter, but I think as we see him face more competitive fighters, we'll see that he is not that high level. And unfortunately for him, he's fighting a guy in Kikuiri who can absolutely showcase those flaws in his game. Now, Kikuiri is on a 4-fight winning streak, most recently outstriking Herman Tirado, and eventually finishing him in that final round with a beautiful body kick and followed up with some ground and pound after that. I'm impressed with Kukuri's pressure, his blitzing attacks, utilizing great quick and fast straight shots down the pipe with stinging power. His defensive grappling is very high level as well. Stuffs takedowns well. If his opponents engage in the clinch against the cage, he does a great job in terms of digging for underhooks, pivoting off of those spots, and then getting back to his own damage. And he has a great cardio game to go 15 minutes if he needs to. He's actually avenged the last loss on his career as well, so he has a pretty solid record. I think it's only 2 losses on his record. Very solid fighter. He just turned 29 as well, so still pretty much in the prime of his career, or at least entering the prime of his career. Slick striking, great footwork, great cardio, stinging power. I think this is a very winnable matchup for him against Bachar. Kikuiri has been knocked out once, and that knockout loss came via ground and pound. But for the most part, I've seen him eat some big, clean shots on the feet, and it didn't seem like it phased him all that much. So his durability has definitely helped him out in some bad spots, and I think it's going to help him out here once again against Bachar. I think Kikuiri is faster, slicker, and he'll ultimately be able to find that big shot to put Bachar away here and win by knockout. I love this minus 185 line on him, and I'm guessing you can figure out how I'm going to be playing him here. All right, next up, we got Gabriel Braga coming in at minus 600, going up against Yves Landu, who comes in at plus 425. Now, starting off on the Braga side of things, his only 2 losses have come against eventual PFL champions. That's Jesus Pinedo, that was the 2023 finals, if I'm not mistaken, and then Timur Khizriev, who he came up short against last time around. But he's still one of the better fighters on the roster. A very slick and nasty Muay Thai, has a solid BJJ game where he can apply chokes and front chokes, but it's usually his aggressiveness with the striking where he's able to walk opponents down and just put that pressure on them. I love his calf kicking style as well, which has debilitated a lot of opponents, so the rest of his offense can flow a little bit more effortlessly. And again, at just 26 years old, the sky's the limit for a guy like Braga. Now he's going up against 38-year-old Yves Landu, who often finds himself fighting in front of the Paris crowd whenever PFL or Bellator would go over there. He's on a 5-fight winning streak with all of those wins coming under the Bellator banner. He's a fan favorite over there. He enters the PFL hoping to make one last stand and earn a $500,000 paycheck as well as a PFL title. He normally looks to utilize his strength by taking opponents down and just crushing them from that top position. In the striking realm, he utilizes a lot of footwork and blitzing attacks with power strikes, but he's often leaving a lot of openings for better strikers to get the better of him. This is a matchup where I believe Braga's discipline and technical striking will be able to pick apart Landu, and as long as his durability holds up and his continuous work in the defensive grappling side of things, I think that he'll wear Landu down and eventually find a finish late in this fight or win it on the scorecards. But minus 600, a little bit wide considering that Landu might be able to utilize his strength effectively and keep Braga on the defensive for more minutes than I'd like, especially for a minus 600. But I think once they do break out into space, we'll see Braga clearly landing the more effective strikes and that being the difference maker here. So I'm going to go Braga, but I think twice about getting all in on that minus 600. Our next up, Muhammad Berkhamov coming in at plus 205, going up against Thad Jean, who comes in at minus 240. Now, Berkhamov is coming off of a split decision against Ray Cooper last time around, but I thought it was clear that he won that fight at least 2 rounds to 1. Berkhamov, as you would expect, a grapple-heavy fighter, but showcases a little bit better jiu-jitsu than we often see from Dagestani wrestlers, hence why we often see him looking for submissions and getting them, and 10 of his 17 wins coming by way of submission. On the feet, not too bad. Has a variety of strikes and combinations that he likes to throw, but I think he is most comfortable when he's able to get fights to the ground where he can control opponents and nullify them completely. His opponent this weekend, Thad Jean, was originally scheduled to fight in the alternate bout against Joseph Luciano. An injury to a fighter that I can't remember off the top of my head has now put Thad Jean into the tournament, and I'm glad. Because in the last write-up that I did for him back in 2024, I said, I'm like, if he wins this weekend, I hope that this is a fighter that they plug in to the main roster and the season or the tournament for PFL. And luckily, he's been able to do it here one way or another. He's 8-0, 5 finishes, a complete dark horse in the industry or in the promotion, a fighter with great range management, great power, great shots down the pipe. His defensive grappling has improved tremendously. He trains out of a smaller gym down in Florida, so it's not really known that well, but this kid has a ton of potential. He's huge. He's very physical, very strong. The nickname, the Silverback, is the perfect nickname for a guy of his stature and his capabilities. His striking game, again, very technical, but also very powerful, which is why he's often able to land big shots and get opponents out of there. Now, I can't really muster up the confidence to fade a guy like Berkhamov at plus 205. Berkhamov is going to be the toughest opponent that Thad Jean has faced, bar none. And with that in mind, I think it's hard to justify parlaying Thad Jean at minus 240 because we don't know if he can deal with the type of wrestling and experience that's coming back his way from Berkhamov. I get it. Berkhamov got put out clean by Lorenz Larkin a few fights ago, but if Thad is not able to find that big shot to put Berkhamov out, how does this fight look going over the course of 15 minutes? I'm still going to lean with Jean here as I think that he can land those big shots and eventually provide that knockout, but you have to be careful in case he can't get that knockout because Berkhamov has more tools to win this fight either by submission or on the scorecards because of his overall game, but I think the damage and the defense of Jean will allow him to outwork Berkhamov, landing more damage over the course of 15 minutes should the fight hit the scorecards, but I think it doesn't. I think we see Jean actually notch that knockout here. So I'll look at the KO prop if it's juicy enough for me to want to take a shot, but I can't play Jean at this line considering this being the toughest fight of his career thus far, but I'm still going to take him to win by knockout. Our next up, we got Jeremy Kennedy coming in at plus 500, going up against former PFL champion Movlid Khaybulaev coming in at minus 700. Now, starting off on the Kennedy side of things, he's finding himself on a 2-fight losing streak now. The first of those losses coming against Patricio Pitbull in a Bellator title fight, and he looked damn good for about 13 minutes before it seemed like Pitbull landed a big shot that completely broke Kennedy, and then from there, Pitbull was able to put together together a barrage of shots that eventually got Kennedy out of there. I think that was a very demoralizing loss for Kennedy because I thought we saw an even worse version of him last time around against Gabriel Braga. He couldn't get into a game, couldn't get into a flow state, tried getting off on some takedowns. Braga shut it down completely. And then from there, we know Braga was already the better striker to begin with. Now, Kennedy is not just a pure grappler. He's showcased some decent strikes just as he did against Pitbull, right? He didn't get off on much grappling in that fight, but his pace, his consistency, his pressure allowed him to win those first 2 rounds up until he got caught and eventually put away. He's a solid fighter, but I think we've seen his ceiling thus far. And he's going up against a very tough Movlid Khaybulaev, who 20-0-1 record. Technically, he has a loss to Daniel Pinedo, where he got knocked out in about 30 seconds back in 2019. But that fight ultimately got overturned to a no contest after Pinedo tested for all the steroids and had all of his recent wins in PFL overturned to no contests. So technically speaking, Khaybulaev is actually still undefeated. But it's unfortunate that we haven't been able to see him more active as of late. He's 34. This is a guy who won the 2021 season of the PFL tournament. He missed the entirety of 2022. He made the playoffs in 2023, but had to pull out because of injury. Did not compete at all in 2024. And now here he is returning, hoping for another PFL title. As you would expect, wrestling is the MO for a guy like Khaybulaev. His striking is a lot of just winging hooks, power shots, blitzing the pocket to eventually disguise a level change and a takedown attempt. But the thing that I think he's best at is keeping opponents down. And that's why Dagestani wrestlers have been so effective in mixed martial arts. Not only are they good at wrestling, but they're good at keeping opponents down. And a lot of that has to do with them disrupting the base of their opponents, attacking any post limb that opponents are trying to use to work back to their feet, and then figure four-ing their legs to keep them on their back as well. Khaybulaev is elite at applying that type of style. And unfortunately for Kennedy, I think he's going to be outgunned in that wrestling style here. And I think we'll see Khaybulaev keep Kennedy moving backwards, eventually engage in the wrestling. Kennedy has some decent wrestling of his own, but it's going to be tough to go takedown for takedown and scramble for scramble against a guy like Khaybulaev. I think it'll take roughly about a round or so for a Khaybulaev style to take effect and really start to settle in. But I think it'll be hard for him to put Kennedy away, eventually leading to this fight going to the scorecards. I'll be looking at the overs. I'll be looking at Khaybulaev by decision, but I think he wins this matchup, and I think he grinds out JBC. And I love me, JBC. Great guy. But unfortunately, this is a very bad stylistic matchup for him, I think. I hope he proves me wrong, by the way. All right, moving on to the next matchup here. We have former PFL finalist Magomed Umalatov coming in at minus 330, going up against Logan Storley, who comes in at plus 270. Now, Umalatov, last time around, came up short in the finals against Shamil Musayev. But I gotta say, I'm stunned at how much he was shut down in that matchup. Now, going into the fight, he was, a plus 220 underdog. And I was more than happy to jump all over that, considering he was undefeated, showcased that he was one of the best fighters outside of the UFC, not just from his wrestling game, but a very educated and dangerous striking game as well. And Musayev shut all of that down. He snuffed out all the takedowns, beat Umalatov to the punch, and eventually finished him in the second round or third round, if I'm not mistaken. But still, at least Umalatov does not have to worry about Musayev in this tournament. I still think he's a high-level fighter, a guy that's more than worthy of winning the PFL title. A great wrestling game, like I said, but a high-level striking game as well, which allows him to knock opponents out, mixing his wrestling behind it as well, really keeping his opponents on edge in terms of what kind of offensive game plan he's going to be looking to implement. He goes up against Logan Storley, who was one of the best Bellator prospects back in the day, and his only losses came to guys like Yaroslav Amosov, actually just Yaroslav Amosov twice, and then last time around against Shamil Musayev, which was Musayev's PFL debut, and that's where he really jumped on the radar by shutting down Storley's game completely and eventually finishing him in the second round. Storley is all about the wrestling, looking to get opponents to the ground and grinding them out, just as he showcased last time around against Luka Poklet. But in the feet, or in the striking realm, he can beat the name and graces of the world by just sticking with a jab and a cross or a hook, but he's going to find it difficult to do it against guys like Shamil Musayev, and unfortunately especially against guys like Magomed Umalatov, who I believe will be able to dictate the pace of this matchup. Look for Umalatov to shut down the wrestling of Storley, beat him up on the feet, and I think he actually comes through with a knockout as well. Minus 330 might be steep for some people, but I think this is a great spot for Umalatov to show off and show out and eventually finish Logan Storley. All right, co-main event here as we have former PFL champion from 2023, Jesus Pinedo, coming in at minus 180, going up against former Bellator title challenger Adam Borics, who comes in at plus 155. Now, last time around, Pinedo was able to do a great job in terms of beating down Gabriel Braga and winning the PFL title and $1 million prize back in 2023. Unfortunately, he was forced to pull out of his scheduled bout against Patricio Pitbull in February 2024 on that champ versus champ card where it was PFL versus Bellator. He ended up missing the 2024 season, was actually scheduled to fight Jeremy Kennedy at the last event last year as well, but he missed weight and was pulled out of that matchup. Hopefully he has that in check now coming into this new season or this world tournament season. Aggressive striker, utilizes good combinations, has some decent durability, but it's usually his pressure and pace that often breaks opponents, and which is why he really had a breakout run with the PFL in 2023. He went 1-1 with the UFC back in the day, but now finds himself 7-1 since that release. His only loss coming by split decision to Gabriel Braga, a loss in which he was able to avenge in his PFL title winning effort. It's 1.5 years since he's been away from action. He's 28 years old, so I'm sure he'll be more than fine to get back into action here and try to reclaim the title that was once his. But he has a very tough Adam Borics to try to do it against here. Now, Borics is a guy that I really thought had the chops to beat Patricio Pitbull and actually win the Bellator title, but a few minor mistakes, fight IQ mistakes, caused him that matchup. I thought he was doing good enough work in the striking realm until he kept jumping guillotine, and that's where Pitbull was able to get that top position and grind him out and win that fight. But when Borics is on and he actually showcases good defensive grappling like he did against Barzola, I don't know why Enrique Barzola, that's where we saw a very good version of Borics, keeping fights in the striking realm, managing his distance, utilizing counter striking, straight shots down the pipe, combination striking. It all looks very good, and Borics looks like a very high-level fighter when he is in his groove. Obviously training alongside the killers over there at Killcliff FC, training alongside Michael Chandler and peaking as close to the time that Chandler is looking to peak next week as well. We could get a very good version of Borics here. I actually think he's the better striker than Pinedo. Pinedo's aggression might make him a little bit more favorable, and that's probably why he's the favorite in this matchup. But if Borics can stick to his counter strikes and really thwart that over-aggressiveness from Pinedo at times, he could land the better shots, might be able to put Pinedo on his ass a few times as well, but I think it could ultimately come down to Borics landing the better strikes, thwarting the aggression of Pinedo, and winning this fight on the scorecards just based on damage. So I'm going to go Borics here as the underdog to pull off the upset, plus 155, sign me up, Borics by decision. All right, that brings us to the main event now. The welterweight headliner here as we have former Bellator champion Jason Jackson looking to take on Russian veteran Andrei Koreshkov. Now, Jackson minus 215, Koreshkov plus 185. Money coming in on Koreshkov is actually Jackson was closer to minus 270 just a few days ago. Jackson is a very solid grinding grappler. This guy loves to break opponents in that clinch and that grind and just wear them down with his top pressure. He's one of those fighters that got multiple chances to try to make it to the UFC, whether it was through the Ultimate Fighter back in 2015 or whether it was in 2017 on the Contender Series, which ultimately ended due to an injury, and he never got another opportunity to fight for a chance to get into the UFC. Since that loss on the Contender Series, he's 11-1. He defeated 27-0 undefeated Bellator champion Yaroslav Amosov in November 2023, and then he fell short against Ramazan Kuramagomedov back in June, and that was a very close fight. That was one that I thought he only lost by one round. I thought Kuramagomedov did enough to win the first 3 rounds. I thought Jackson clearly won the next 2 rounds, but I thought we'd see Jackson be a little bit more assertive earlier on in that matchup to get his hand raised, but seemed like Kuramagomedov did a good enough job in terms of just continuously stifling him, landing takedowns, and controlling him. Koreshkov, probably still one of the best top 10 fighters that never got to compete for the UFC. Very solid striking, obviously under the guidance of Alexander Shlemenko. Great spinning attacks, great kicks, good striking. But it's really his grappling that has set him apart in some of these matchups. Just like when he defeated Lorenz Larkin just a few fights back. His fight against Gayoti Yamauchi. Yamauchi was able to get some takedowns and really get some control time. But once Koreshkov was able to get back to the feet, he was able to out-damage Yamauchi and ultimately win that fight on the scorecards. Koreshkov also has a little bit of a gas tank issue that can be taken advantage of by fighters like Jason Jackson. This could be competitive early, but as we start to get in the second and third rounds, and I'm hoping Jackson learned his lesson from the Kuramagomedov fight, that he needs to get started sooner, especially now that he'll only have 15 minutes to try to make a mark. I think we see him grind Koreshkov out, stay away from the striking, take him to the ground, keep that top position, and just wear him down, and then eventually win this fight on the scorecards. I'm a big Koreshkov fan, but I think this is a bad stylistic matchup for him, especially with somebody that has the relentless grappling style and cardio that Jason Jackson does to eventually win this fight. So give me Jackson, and Jackson by decision. There you guys go. PFL 1 breakdowns wrapped up for you guys right there, all 10 fights. Again, this goes down on Thursday, so don't get caught slacking there. But make sure you guys tune in for all the other UFC content that I got dropping on the YouTube channel. I dropped my full card breakdown on Sunday, so that's already up for you guys. Every day of the week, I'll be dropping a new segment as well, talking about different angles on the UFC card. And lastly, we also have OKTAGON going down this weekend. I believe that's going down the morning of the afternoon of the UFC card. So if you want an appetizer to the UFC card, I'll have written breakdowns for all OKTAGON fights and then tracked plays for that as well, all on the Patreon page, the MMA Lock of the Night Patreon page. You can find that in the description below. Otherwise, I will see you guys again tomorrow for the UFC Vegas 105 Chalk or Not segment. See you guys then. Peace.